Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today I have with me Sreedhar Sistu, who's currently VP of AI Offers at Schneider Electric. Now, Sreedhar started off his career working as a senior engineer or as in engineering, subsequently got into a little bit of consulting. He's currently now actually a member of the World Economic Forum, specifically in AI governance and alliance, and is currently, of course, the VP of AI Affairs at Schneider Electric. But Sreedhar, can you tell me a little bit more from your perspective? Tell me more about your background and how led you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, thank you again for having me in your podcast. It's a pleasure to be here and sharing some of my perspectives with your audience. I think to reinforce your introduction, so I'm currently responsible for AI products at Schneider Electric and hold positions at World Economic Forum as well as work with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on their AI initiatives. So, I mean, really, my background has been, on the personal side, that of someone who originally from India. I grew up there. I went to college, and later on, some serendipitous, occasions just brought me here, and all my professional career has been, in US. And the common theme in my, career has been, technology and business. How technology enables businesses, it makes better, and ultimately, helps the society. This is a trajectory we have seen, for hundreds of years now. I think starting with the Industrial Revolution, and we can get into it much more later. Um, so I think I've done a number of roles in technology industry as an engineer and an R&D manager, product management. I went to business school, mid-career, and then now, more recently, been working on AI, to transform, companies and products.
Excellent. So starting off as an engineer, what I'm actually very curious about is when you're making a transition to product management, you have to actually understand at some point you have to step out of the technical role and understand some of the business perspectives. At what point of your career did you understand that was a necessity?
So this started early on because even though I, was trained as an engineer and I really liked working in technical, domain, there is always the question of why do you do these things? So the why they kind of draws you towards business and customer, more importantly. Some of the things that kind of help reinforce that are, after working in engineering, and then I worked as professional services for a while, where I had to work, firsthand with, customers, right? And what you learn there is what you imagine as a product, something that you build with lots of features. I mean, I know you are in college, studying economics, etc. Product is a bundle of features, right? And when you're inside the engineering shop, you think that everything is important, especially you are enamored with all these really technically sophisticated features, that are cool. But from the end user perspective, it's really a tool. It is something that they want to do a specific job done. And there is this asymmetry between what you think is really important and useful and what the customers actually find it useful. Understanding that asymmetry is really key. And when I started working directly with customers and going and deploying software, etc., that really gave me a good opening into understanding what people care, how they perceive. Now, sometimes it's actually very humbling for you to learn that, because you might think that why aren't they using my super duper complex feature that we spent months coding?
Right.
The thing is, it didn't really matter to them, right?
Right. Yes.
So sometimes it's humbling, but it also gives you a good perspective of what to focus on, how to think about products, and how to put yourself in the larger scheme of things in the customer environment and the usage, be it businesses or consumers, right? Rather than really focus only on what you are doing.
Right. And I would like to make apologies for interrupting you, but I want to make a commentary on what you said. Actually, is actually understanding the business side of things is very important. not only from the technical perspective, but it's widely applicable to even the medical field. If you look at urgent cares, there are about less than there was about less than 2,000 or around 7,000 locations in 2010. And the reason why it wasn't expanding properly is because they didn't know how to make urgent cares profitable. And once
Mhm.
they cracked that, it ended up averaging around 500,000 in profit. And once that happened a decade later, around 2020, we're seeing over 14,000 statewide urgent care locations, specifically serving underserved areas. Now, this
Mhm.
this idea, this concept is not just applicable to the technical side, but it's also applicable to other areas where you want to maximize impact and help people in general. So I apologize for interrupting you, but I do want to mention that one thing really quickly. But
No,
continue what you're
absolutely. I
saying.
mean, yeah, this is applicable in the other domains. So I think this experience really helped me understand that you have to get onto the other side to make the product better. And ultimately,
Mhm,
as a business, you're there to make a good return for your investors and for your
mhm,
shareholders, and you want to be really focusing on that. But the best way to do that is to understand the customer,
right.
and that really gave me the impetus to learn more about business. And there
Mhm,
are more things that you need to do in business than simply building a product. So that also led me to getting an education. I mean, everyone can say that you kind of sort of know, and especially in today's age of abundance of information, you can find pretty much the entirety of MBA course online. But the experience of going through it, at a school, formally learning, and
mhm,
not just having the superficial scratch the surface. I mean, we can get about 70% by reading a blog post, right? But you really want to get into it, to learn. So that was a very useful experience for me to get into school and learn things formally. And I'm a firm believer in strong education, as a
certainly.
backbone for anyone. And then help me transition into product management and start to design products that customers would like to buy.
Mhm. So one of the components you just mentioned is truly understanding the customer. Now, I have a question about your approach to actually understanding customers. Is there a balance between following what they say versus what they actually might need? Because
Mhm.
sometimes they may not know what they might need.
Yeah. No, it's a classic problem in product management where do you want to be a visionary that is trying to create products that customers don't yet know they want. Okay, I
Hmm.
mean, everyone knows about Steve Jobs saying that if we ask the customer for a new kind of mobile phone, they would not have
Hmm.
created iPhone. It would have been,
Hmm.
completely something else. Or, at the turn of the century, if you ask customers what did they want, they wanted a faster horse buggy, not a car that, required gasoline
Exactly.
and a whole different architecture. So I think there is a mix of this. You see, this is
Hmm.
where I think the idea of, yes, you want to listen to customers, you want to understand what they want, but you also have to be able to understand the context in which they are giving the answers. So
Mm.
they are
Okay.
always, you don't give answers. There is I mean, I'll digress a bit. There is a concept in philosophy called a viewpoint from nowhere, right? I mean, this is supposed to be this objective reality. There is
Hmm.
nothing like that. Customers give, from their context, and you have to assimilate them, and then you have to formulate what they would actually buy.
Hmm.
That is not a verbatim of what they have said, but what is implied.
Okay.
And the second thing is, this is going back to the famous Clayton Christensen of Harvard Business School,
Hmm.
talking about the products are essentially there to get jobs done. We have to think in terms of the jobs that this product is going to do, rather than
Hmm.
as product in its entirety.
Hmm.
So these are some of the frameworks that you need to use to build your vision for the product. It does not negate the need to talk to customers and understand them, but you have to know the
Hmm.
limitations of directly translating what customer says.
Excellent. Now, tell me a little bit more about the story behind you joining the World Economic Forum. I was actually curious about that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's Schneider Electric is an active member of World Economic Forum, and
Hmm.
we as As a company, we have taken a pretty forward-looking approach towards AI. We are also key participants in the AI economy. In that, a lot of the data centers, everyone knows that you need chips to run data center, but you
Of
also need
course.
electricity, and you also need cooling. You also need power backup. All the things that Schneider Electric provides. So we're a
Which are hard to
key part.
find sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at that, the whatever the multi-tiered cake, or the Jensen Huang talks about, on AI. So we
Hmm.
are at foundation layer.
Right, right. So,
So
yeah, please go ahead.
World Economic Forum, I think World Economic Forum also has taken a really comprehensive approach, and really a global approach to AI. So that's actually a unique perspective that they bring compared to what here in US, we are focused on. Where there is a lot going on in US. US is quote unquote the center of the universe for AI.
Hmm.
Great, but I think there is a whole other world that is also working on AI and how to harness it. It was, kind of a mutually interesting relationship with the World Economic Forum, where they have members from various companies, and I represent Schneider Electric, and given our position, both as a provider to AI economy as well as a user of AI, and lastly. I think we also bring a lot of global perspective because it's a large
Hmm.
company that has
Right.
global presence and the impact. And personally, I benefited from being there because you get to meet people from, I don't know, Middle East, Africa, that you don't think of generally when you talk about AI.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so it's a fantastic win-win situation.
Excellent. So around 2020 is where I can see on your LinkedIn specifically is where you started getting into AI roles. But my assumption is you started studying it much probably before or got involved a little bit before. So tell me a little bit more about the transition of approaching AI and understanding that and how it impacts roles. At what point did you start pursuing that?
Yeah, it's a great question that you asked, Aryan.
Hmm.
It's kind of funny when I tell people that uh, I actually started learning about AI way back in college. For
Wow.
some, it was, I think a moment where I was enamored with the technology, which by the way was in its infancy at that time. I'm talking
Of
about,
course.
mid 90s, and I was in India, and you don't have a lot of access to, computing, etc., in the places where I studied. The first programming language I learned was called Prolog. It's called programming in logic. It was one of the foundations for AI.
Hmm.
And believe it or not, you could write chatbots in them. Okay, there was a famous chatbot called Eliza that was written up, way before me in 80s,
Wow.
before ChatGPT came. So
Yeah.
I was enamored with this technology because when I read about the books on thinking machines, and how AI and the neural networks were an academic concept at that time. So this was,
Hmm.
believe me, in my undergrad. I was fascinated with the concept, and I wanted to pursue further education, in AI, which was not possible at that time.
Right.
And then I actually went to study, math and statistics, which
Hmm.
are also, little did I know, is the foundation for the future of everything that we do with machine learning.
Right.
Um, but then it was not a great place in a area to find jobs, to be very clear. And of course,
Hmm.
I continued on the trajectory of working with software engineering and technical products, enterprise software. But this always kind of stayed in the back of my mind that and when in 2017 time frame, when things started becoming more real, with AI and
Hmm.
the ImageNet and all the things that were happening on internet, I started retooling myself. I started going back to basics and understanding about AI and what is the state of the art. That yeah, and I started seeing opportunities to use this technology in enterprise products. So that's kind of how I was able to make the
Right.
transition. But it was serendipitous. I mean, it was something that I had an inclination, from my undergrad days.
Hmm. So the real question for you here is when you're working on applying AI at the enterprise level, I think one of the biggest distinctions we need to see here is what is it that actually drives tangible outcomes versus what is the difference between that and someone or a company trying to apply AI because it appears good. So what do you think is the biggest difference between those two and how they operate?
Yeah. And this is another differentiator in the approach that we have taken, and I'll
Hmm.
speak about my experience with Schneider, where I think for a lot of enterprises, the challenge is not really in the feasibility of technology. For many
Hmm.
problems, I think the technology is there to solve them.
Hmm.
The question really is about how do you do this at scale? How do you
Hmm.
deploy things? How do you have, and how do you deploy them for business value, right?
Right.
So what we started with it is, let's assume that technology can do everything that you want. It's there, it's available. Okay. Now, how are you going to make a compelling business case from that? Whether it is to improve the process, make it more efficient and save money, or delight customers, or build new product and features that are going to differentiate your product better and generate incremental revenue. So
Hmm.
that was the first thing. So to be business value focused. The second one is um, how to make sure that you can deploy at scale, because there is the chasm between I have a POC that works, that I show it to my manager, or we make a technical demo, and these days with the coding agents and everything, it's a matter of hours, not even days, to create something
Right.
that looks great. But making it run in production, making it be used by thousands of users is a whole different
Hmm.
game.
Right.
You just don't know the failure modes in which it is operating, and things that you have to account for in real life, right?
Hmm.
So it requires a whole different mindset, and a lot of companies that don't follow this, get into this trap of, I have lots of POCs, I have lots of ideas that we want to do, but it takes an year, 2 years for them to actually realize any benefit.
Okay.
And that is what I observe when I go out and speak in forums, etc. And
Hmm.
it is not for lack of trying. I mean, a lot of people are well intentioned, but I think many times you get enamored with the technology. And I'm a technical guy. I mean, I love technology, but it's easy to get enamored with it. But you have to look at, why do you want to do this, and if you are going to do this, how do you make sure that it's going to run at scale?
Right, right. I agree. So, what another question could be that's very important is about AI transformation specifically. As we've seen before with digital transformations themselves, these particular routes, these particular processes have only about 33% success rate, if I'm correct. I believe it's around 33%, and it's because for majority of the reason is not engaging the key stakeholders in the process of a digital transformation. Now, an important question is about AI transformation specifically. Here you can see potentially even employees becoming a bit more resistant to AI transformation. So a question for you is, what do you think needs to happen in order to have successful AI transformations, given that we've had unsuccessful or high rates of unsuccessful digital transformations in the past?
Yeah. So I think with the AI transformation, first of all, I will put the caveat that I am in the camp of people who look at
Mhm.
AI as, this is transformational technology. This is really important. It's going to make an impact, but it is still a technology that is, to be implemented like any other technology.
Right.
It's not a magical thing that is going to, even if you consider the image of, I've got 10,000 of AI workers doing the job, AI agents. I mean, it's nice, but I think there are many steps to go before, right? Now,
Right.
in order to make this successful, you still need, the basics of digital transformation. That is,
Mhm.
you really have to understand the process. You have to find ways, where the technology can be applied, and you have to have proper change management, to translate, this piece of technology into a piece of workflow that people can use every day, and then it becomes, second nature.
Mhm.
There is another twist though with AI, um,
Okay.
for a few reasons. Number one, I think the technology has been moving so rapidly, and there is so much publicity on the the type of technology. Like
Hmm.
when I was around when internet was the was considered a transformational technology in
Hmm.
2000s, but no one was talking about how this is going to change everything or cause unemployment and whatnot. Everyone was thinking this is going to be a big thing that is going to be positive. Same thing with
Hmm.
mobile. In when mobile phones came, and they said this is useful, but this is not going to fundamentally destroy anything. I think with AI, there is a lot of noise around how this may or may not impact, and I think cutting through that is going to be key.
Hmm.
Secondly, there is also a lot of individual experiences, personal experience people are having with AI. So
Hmm.
it is, it consumes of the image of, there is a person on the other side, even if it is a token generating machine on the other side, right? So
Hmm.
I think this is a double-edged sword. So people are becoming, more and more aware of AI, but then it also has the effect that there are super heightened expectations, of what AI can do. But in the end, you realize that okay, this is going to do a certain part of the work in your workflow. It's not going to create your full final essay. It will give
Okay.
you a good draft that you still have to work on it, right? And it's
Right.
the same
Right.
thing for people using in business, that you're not going to be automating everything. You still have to
Hmm.
control everything that happens. So I think the rapid pace of technology innovation and the personal experiences people have are the additional factors that we didn't see with the other digital transformations at the enterprise level.
Right. And I think you mentioned a very good point about actually understanding the limitations of what AI can do. I think the idea that it can do everything and anything is absolutely incorrect. There's actually I had a principal AI engineer from McKinsey actually tell me this, that one of the caps that we have, the caps and limitations we have right now is that we don't have enough subject experts at reviewing the workloads that AI are doing at his company specifically, which is why they can't go extremely high scale with this, because of course finance is a sensitive industry, right? So you have to understand the limitations of what AI can do and actually understand the change you want to create in the company. I think those are really good perspectives and ones that I think are not talked about enough regarding limitations.
Yeah.
Now let's go
And,
ahead
and,
and
and
go ahead.
sorry to interject, let me add just one more point that crossed my mind, which
Mhm.
is the other thing is when it is what AI is good at doing, it's good at doing a lot of the unstructured work,
Mhm.
right? Things that you don't really plan. I mean, there are defined workflows in companies, but there's a lot of unstructured work that happens between them. And
Mhm.
AI can, automate a lot of that. But in order for it to automate, you have to be able to define precisely what that unstructured work is.
Right.
And it is quite hard because people do it because they have some kind of a tacit knowledge on the work to be done, and making this explicit to let an agent, take over is quite hard. So
Mhm.
there is actually a limitation on that side too.
Love it. So what we'll do now is go ahead and shift the conversation to a little bit more about you, Sridhar. And the first
Yeah.
question I have for you is, what is something about you that you wish more people knew about?
Uh, as much as I don't know if I want more people to know about this, but
Okay.
something that normally doesn't come across is I'm as much a technologist and working in a cutting edge field like this. Um, I am a I love reading about history, particularly
Hmm.
the ancient history. So I go back all the way to ancient times, and it's fascinating to learn that some of the things stay the same even in last 4 or 5 thousands of recorded
Hmm.
human history. So I love doing that. And I'm also a poetry buff. I like reading poetry, especially the old poetry that I know from my
Hmm.
mother tongue. Uh, it's completely different from my day job, but something that
Hmm.
I really enjoy doing.
Right. So there's probably a lot that's different about you from since you were 20 or since you were in your 20s. But if you could point out the biggest difference between you in your 20s and you now, what do you think the biggest difference is?
Hmm. Um, it's a good question. I think
It's hard. Yeah, it's a hard question.
sorry.
Yeah, it's a hard question.
Yeah. So I'll start with something that has not changed, and
Hmm.
something that is, then I'll build on that. I think something that has not changed is, focus on hard work and learning continuously. These are the two traits that, if somebody gives you a job, you want to do 120% of the job, and
Hmm.
you want to be you want to be proud of what you have done, and uh,
Hmm.
and in this field or anywhere, you have to continuously learn in
Hmm.
to stay current.
Hmm.
I think things that have changed are, I think, a bit more appreciation of how complex organizations work, how complex changes can happen. um, because for this you need a slightly longer horizon to be there and influence people. I think the what we typically call as soft skills, etc. You have to build muscle for that, and I think that is
Hmm.
something that I can see changed in myself. That you're trying to communicate with someone, whether you're initiating a change, how to think a bit more comprehensively, and what I call
Hmm.
as a second order thinking. You can say that, okay, I do X, Y will happen. No, but then what? I think you need to
Hmm.
start to think about that, and that's what makes you a bit more useful than I was in my 20s.
Yeah, love it. So what I'll do now is go ahead and share a very concise perspective regarding health and fitness, and then we'll go ahead and
Yeah,
conclude the podcast subsequently with Sridhar's plans for this year. So the main perspective I want to provide today is really about how to make an approach time efficient so that you can actually adhere to the requirements of making the transformation. So as anyone knows, there's always a set of requirements to get to a goal. And if you do anything less than what's required to get to that specific goal of yours, the ability to actually get that end goal is compromised, right? You're not going to get to that end goal. Now, the biggest problem I really see today is really the fact that there's a prioritization on a location dependent approach with a very hectic schedule. What I mean by that is someone that adheres to a gym based approach or a studio based approach and has a schedule that does not allow them to adhere to that all the time. So the biggest issue is you have to shift your entire schedule around to attend to these particular processes and these particular strategies. Meaning you have to go to the actual physical location, you have to come back, of course, take a shower, etc. And the people that don't have that capacity, who are potentially traveling or potentially taking calls all day, will not have the capacity to make a transformation off of that successfully. So you have to think about it a little bit differently, which is that try to prioritize something that's location independent and that can actually adapt to your schedule as opposed to you making time for it and you having to go to a specific location for it. Something I would recommend is leveraging something like step count, which is something I always talk about because it's something you can do essentially anytime there's a ground underneath you, which I'm assuming for 99.9% of your life there will be ground underneath you to do. So right, so basically that's the idea is create a strategy that can actually adapt to where you go. So it doesn't matter if you're traveling, it doesn't matter if you're taking a phone call, it doesn't matter if you are even in a completely different country, you can still be leveraging step count. You don't have to be dependent on a strategy that's focused on one fixed location. And that's the idea. Can you create something that can adapt to where you go and allows you to adhere to the requirements so you can get that end goal? That's the idea behind it. And step count is actually what I personally use, and this strategy is what I use to lose over 70 pounds and actually keep it off. So hopefully it gives a different perspective to what is traditionally told and one that can actually be adhered to long term. So hopefully that was valuable. What we'll do now is go ahead and conclude the fitness conversation and go ahead and move on to Sreedhar's plans for this year.
yeah, we are halfway through the year almost.
Yes, yes, yes.
Um, no, my plans are, really to stay abreast of the technology. I mean, there is with the agentic AI, there is a huge transformation underway, and I think
Mhm.
companies are underestimating the effort needed to adopt this. I think this is going to be a massive application. In
Mhm.
many places, it's going to make a significant impact. So something that I'm working on. Um, Personally, of course, I have some plans to uh, increase, and with the summer coming up, probably do more hikes.
Yeah.
I plan to redo the hike of Mount Washington that I did several years ago, the tallest peak in White Mountains. So very
Mhm.
satisfying and exciting.
Very good. Or where can people learn more about Sreedhar? Is LinkedIn the best place to learn more about you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place. I think I'm generally I don't say I'm a regular poster, but I do share things there. And I have had plans to put a Substack for a long time. It just never found time to that. So maybe you know sometime soon I will get a Substack, and then I can link it to my LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining me on the podcast, Sreedhar. It was a pleasure to have you on. This was Aryan Mohit.